There are a lot of connector options on the website, and they allow you to do different things within your projects, which is why I wanted to do a full video dedicated to showing you all of the MakerPipe connectors. We're going to talk about each of them, how they work, and how you can use them in your builds so you can get a better idea of which ones you need for your project. And I'm just going to jump right into it and start with the MakerPipe flange. And this is a rigid flange that is made up of two pieces that you can bolt together. And all of the MakerPipe hardware is the same. You use a M6 nut and bolt that's included with the connector, and they all assemble with a 5mm hex wrench. And that's how you're going to put all of the MakerPipe connector system together. And it's the same for the flange. And essentially you're going to use two nuts and bolts that go through these two holes here, and this essentially clamps around the EMT conduit. And this is pretty cool because it allows you to use the flange in a normal way, which is bolting the EMT conduit to a flat surface, just utilizing the 4 bolt holes on the bottom. But because of the clamp design, you can actually clamp this around EMT conduit and pretty much anywhere along the piece of conduit. And we've seen people use this on the underside of a table to kind of hide panels but still secure it really well. So that's really cool and something to keep in mind whenever you're building and using the MakerPipe flange. And then just like the standard flange, we have another flange that allows you to bolt EMT conduit to a flat surface. And this is the MakerPipe adjustable angle flange. And it's made up of these 2 base pieces as well as a couple of pieces that you're going to see a lot in this video, which are these 2 pieces that make up the MakerPipe end clamp. And these will clamp around a piece of conduit, and the conduit will terminate inside the end of the connector here. And then you've got the 2 base pieces that will clamp around the end clamp here. And you can secure this to your flat surface utilizing the 6 bolt holes in the bottom 2 base pieces. And then you can use this kind of similar to the standard flange where you can mount it rigid at an angle, and you can pretty much do any angle up to 180 degrees in either direction. And then something else cool you can do is actually leave the 2 base pieces slightly loose, and you can utilize this as a hinge if you want for your project. We've seen people like Billy did that for his fence gate, where you can see that the whole gate will hinge and rotate, and that's thanks to the adjustable angle flange. And that's pretty much the standard way, or the 2 ways that you'll see the adjustable angle flange used in projects. And we'll just keep working our way down, and we'll kind of go through some more of the nuanced connectors, which are another one is the adjustable 180. And this is essentially made up of these 2 middle pieces that will clamp around the EMT conduit in the middle. And then you're going to have, like I said, you're going to see this connector a lot. You're going to have the 2 end pieces that make up the end clamp, and those are going to go in between these 2 pieces. So you're actually going to join 3 pieces of EMT conduit together with the adjustable 180. You're going to have 1 in the middle and then 2 on the sides, and these 2 can be rotated at any angle and then secured in place or left loose to hinge. And this is really useful for creating braces in your projects, especially if you have 2 angle pieces coming into one central support pipe and you don't want to stack connectors, figure out 2 different measurements. This allows you to have it nice and even, and it looks good. And that's typically how we see the adjustable 180 degree used. We also have other connectors such as the MakerPipe coupling, which is going to work really well for extending builds and extending lengths of pipe. So essentially you can find EMT conduit in the hardware store in either 5 or 10 foot lengths. And we don't recommend that you just use the coupling and create 20 or 30 foot long piece of conduit. You don't want to do that. You still want to brace accordingly. But there are times that you want to strategically add length to a piece of conduit in your build, and the MakerPipe coupling really comes in handy to do that because it just simply clamps around 2 pieces of EMT conduit and joins them together and creates that kind of end-to-end connection so you can extend the piece of conduit and create the length that you need. And that's pretty much it with the coupling. It's a very simple use case, but it's very useful for DIY projects. Now, next up is another one that you'll see. It's useful, but for pretty specific situations usually that we see it. This is the MakerPipe 135 degree connector, which is made up of these 2 pieces that clamp together. And this is another connector that joins 3 pieces of EMT conduit together. You've got 1 in the middle and then 2 that terminate on the sides. And that's something to keep in mind with all of the MakerPipe connections. You're either going to have that terminating connection or that through pipe connection. And you want to keep an eye on that as you're building, because sometimes you might want the piece of conduit to run continuously through the connector, or you might want it to sit flush, which we'll talk about more in detail towards the end when I talk about the T connector. But then other times you're going to have the piece of conduit where it's going to terminate inside of the connector, and that's just because these are made so you don't have to do any drilling or any welding, and because of that, the bolt needs to pass through the connector pieces somewhere, and so that's where the piece of conduit is going to stop inside of the connectors, and you just kind of have to keep that in mind whenever you're planning your projects and figuring out which connectors you need. But back to the 135, this is mostly used for creating peaks in projects. If you want a nice angled roof, we've seen it used in a greenhouse. We've also seen people create octagons with it. It's a really good connector for roof peaks, and it has that nice angle. That's not as harsh as some of the others, like the 90 degree, but that's typically how we see it used. And I'll kind of go ahead and touch on the 90 degree connector while we're talking about angled pieces, because this is another connector that you might commonly see used for a roof peak, but this is a much harsher angle and not really what we typically see with a roof peak. More so, we see this used in the corners of builds to create a three-way corner connection, because just like the 135, it joins three pieces of EMT conduit together, one in the middle that can run continuously through it or sit flush, and the two that terminate, but this is just a different angle. This is a 90-degree angle, and it works really well if you're making a three-dimensional cube. A lot of people will use this for a two-dimensional cube, and then they'll leave out this middle connection, but this goes for any of the maker pipe connectors. You want to use all the pieces of conduit that is intended for the connector. So like this one is designed for 3. You want to use 3 in there for the best support. We'll talk about the T connector, which works better for a two-dimensional rectangle, and we'll talk about that later. But for now, the 90-degree connector is what you'll use if you're creating a cube. We see this one really commonly for pretty much any structure, like a desk, a garden enclosure, shelves, all kinds of stuff. You'll use the 90-degree connector in the corners to create that main cube structure. And like I said, sometimes more nuanced, we'll see it used as a roof peak as well. But going back, we'll talk about some more of the bracing connectors. Bracing is really important for projects, and there's a couple that you can use for bracing. Like I said, the adjustable 180 is one of them. And then you also have the 45-degree connector. And this is a rigid connector that joins two pieces of conduit together, and it's pretty much just meant to grab onto a piece of conduit and then send another pipe off at an angle. And this works really well for bracing, and it's pretty straightforward. That's typically what we see used for braces. But you also have another connector for bracing that is a little bit more useful, just depending on the situation and your specific build. This is the adjustable angle connector, which works similarly to the adjustable angle flange and the adjustable 180, where it utilizes these end clamps and then these two pieces that we call the puzzle piece clamp, and it goes around the EMT conduit, and then then you have the end clamp between those two pieces, and you can basically create an angled brace at pretty much any angle up to 180 degrees in either direction, and you can also leave it loose to hinge it, just like with the other pieces that utilize the end clamp. And you can also separate these two pieces in half. You can actually utilize the top half of the connector to mount a 1/2-inch thick material, and you can also use the end clamp. We've seen people create all kinds of custom mounts utilizing the end clamp, and you can buy these separately if you want to do something creative with some half of it but not the other half. And that's really cool. This connector is really useful for bracing and creating hinges, all kinds of cool stuff that you can do with this. And I should have mentioned earlier on that I'm talking about the 3/4-inch connector system, but we also have the 1-inch connector system as well, which a lot of the same connectors are available for 1-inch as well. And something else too is you can utilize the 3/4-inch connector system with 1/2-inch EMT conduit if you pick up some of the adapter shims that we have on the website, or if you click the 1/2-inch variant on the product pages, you'll get the adapter shims included, and that allows you to basically build with 1/2-inch EMT conduit if 3/4 or 1-inch is not your, is not what you need for your project. So I wanted to mention that as well. But that's the adjustable angle hinge connector, and we're working our way through. We only have a few left. Next up, we'll talk about the 180-degree connector. And this is a really great connector, kind of similar use case as the coupling, but I like it if you're building something that needs that bracing. Like I said, we don't want you to create a 30-foot piece of conduit. It's not going to be sturdy in your project. But what you can do is use the 180-degree connector, which is meant to join 3 pieces of EMT conduit together, just like some of the others, where you have one that can run continuously through the middle or sit flush, and then the 2 that terminate. And this is at a 180-degree angle. And this works really well in your builds that is going to be like over 5 foot. We usually say every 4 or 5 foot to have some sort of brace, whether it be vertical or an angled support. And this works really well to basically break up that horizontal span and then allow you to add a vertical support and then continue the run of conduit on the other side. We see this really commonly used for all kinds of projects because of how useful it is for adding that vertical support and extending frames. And you can also use this, and this actually goes the same for any of the connectors with a through connection. Sometimes you see the pictures on the website and you see it oriented like this and think it has to be used that way. We've also seen people flip it over and use it really creatively in their projects as well, and that goes for pretty much any of the connections, like I said, with the through pipe connection. But that's pretty much the 180, and where it's typically the most useful is just extending frames and adding a vertical support in your build. And kind of similar to the 180, it actually uses the same flat piece, just one this time, is the 4-way connector, which allows you to pretty much do the same thing. So you have the vertical support in the middle, extend the frame, have 2 pieces coming out either side, but then it also adds another piece of conduit that extends to the other side of your build, which is really useful in your projects where you not only want to add a vertical support, but also a support to the other side of your structure as well. So this is another one that we see commonly used, especially if you've got a trellis or something and you want to add a cross support and then hang some trellis netting off of it. This is really useful for that, and just useful in general for building out frames and bracing them appropriately. And kind of similar to the 4-way is the 5-way connector, which essentially allows you to do a very similar thing as the 4-way, except it adds an additional piece of conduit out of the other side as well. So we've got the one in the middle, and then you've got one coming out of each side for a total of 5 connected pieces of conduit. And this one obviously is a lot of conduit coming into one spot, so we don't see it used as much as some of the others, but it is really useful in those situations where you need to create pretty much like a grid system or an X-frame. This is really useful for that, and we've seen it used in a variety of different projects that create that kind of rectangular grid shape, and you need to add the vertical support while continuously expanding out the frame in different directions as well. That's the 5-way connector. And then last but not least is probably the most versatile connector in the MakerPipe system, and that is the MakerPipe T connector. It joins 2 pieces of EMT conduit together. You've got one piece that runs continuously through the top half, or it can sit flush, as we've mentioned, and you've got another piece that can terminate in the bottom half of the connector. And this is, like I said, really versatile. You can use it, commonly just to make that T joint, just to add a cross support to your frame. People can use it for corners. You can stack 2 and create different angles, as we've talked about on the channel in another video that I'll link down below. And you can use this really creatively. You can angle it along a piece of conduit, and just kind of use it for all kinds of different things. It's a very versatile connector, and it's the most economical out of all the connectors. So it's really useful, and like I said, probably the most popular out of all of them by far. That's pretty much the MakerPipe connector system. Hopefully you guys found this useful and understand more of the connectors and how you can use them in your builds. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those down below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.